but mood management is everything. It's everything for women who have ADHD because you think about it like this. We have a brain and it's a beautiful brain and we're very smart, but our brain is unable to compartmentalize. Unable. Zero. So you've got a mood and you've got this emotion and you cannot compartmentalize it. So it goes into everything. It spreads into every aspect of your being, of your soul, of your body. Like it's just, you become that mood. And so because we cannot compartmentalize, moods and emotions are everything. And managing your moods and emotions is everything.
I think ADHD is so misunderstood. And in particular, I think many women go their entire lifetime before they're actually diagnosed. So I'm starting to see more and more patients in perimenopause and menopause who are like, you're not going to believe this. I just got diagnosed with ADHD.
Mhm.
So let's unpack what ADHD actually is, because I think many of us, maybe that are parents, our exposure to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is really in the context of children's friends or children that we know. And there's so much more to it. This is not something that just occurs in children, it is
No.
something that occurs throughout the trajectory of our lifetime.
Once, if you're born with ADHD, you have ADHD. So all of the adults that are being diagnosed now with ADHD have had it their entire life. And we're probably, utilizing some pretty amazing skills and tools just to get by. And things were likely, if you're talking to these people now and you ask them about their childhood, things were likely a lot harder for them in terms of schoolwork and just being able to get something done and in their careers. And it just always seems like things were harder for them than they were for everyone else, so they figure out ways to get by and to succeed, but it's stressful and it's difficult, and they've been living with this condition and they had no idea.
Yeah,
So
I think for so many of us, whatever makes us unique, and whether it's that we're a little neurodivergent, whether we've got some degree of ADHD, I think we all compensate for our own peculiarities, our own uniqueness. And one of the things that I find really interesting is now we understand a whole lot more about the biochemistry of what's actually going on in the brain with ADHD. Can we talk a little bit about this? Because I do find it really interesting how neurotransmitters, how these chemical messengers might impact or might interact differently in an ADHD brain versus a non ADHD brain.
so all we know, and it's kind of interesting based on the fact that it seems like ADHD is like everywhere lately, especially since the pandemic, right? Um, all we actually know scientifically is that people who have ADHD have less dopamine available in their brain. And whether that's because we have less dopamine or whether, we're producing less or whether it's because less is being absorbed, we don't know exactly, but we have less dopamine, period. And a lot of the actions and behaviors that we display as kids and as adults are ways to create more dopamine, and we don't know that that's why we're doing it, but that's what we're doing. It's just, I call it unconsciously creating stimulus.
And how does that show up? Like, if someone's listening and they're curious, what are some of the habits or some of the symptoms that are more commonly seen with an ADHD brain?
Well, we're all different, number one. But you'll see, I mean, if we want to talk about women specifically, it's quite different in general than for men specifically, because the ways that men tend to unconsciously seek out dopamine is more physical hyperactivity, just in actions, in movements, in honestly, in eye contact. Like if you're sitting across the table from a man who has ADHD, it's much more likely that he won't be making eye contact with you. He'll be like looking around and just like, you'll see his eyes darting back and forth. And it's just hard for us to focus in general on one thing. For women, these behaviors tend to be much more internal. And that's why they're not obvious. That's why a lot of women get missed because our hyperactivity and the ways that we need to create dopamine, even though we don't know that that's what we're doing, um, you can't see it. It's not outwardly disruptive. It's not obnoxious or disturbing or annoying for teachers. It's none of that. It's just like nonstop ruminating is a huge one, is one that a lot of us will relate to. Catastrophizing. And when I say that, I don't mean, once in a while, because we all do that. I mean every single day. Um, just in terms of how we, think about, one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And it's really hard for us to follow through even on a thought. So we tend to go in circles, or, just like you're here and then you're here and then you're here and then you're here. And it's just, it's kind of interesting because you were mentioning earlier that a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause are just finding out that they have ADHD. But if you think about what that actually is. It's when we enter into perimenopause, our estrogen is lower, it starts to decline. And that means that our dopamine is also declining. So now you have a person who already has lower dopamine, and they're heading into, and they've managed to get by in their life, and they're doing okay even though things have been harder. And now they're hitting into a phase of life where the dopamine that they do have, even that's declining. So it's like all of the symptoms and things that were kind of being, I guess, being managed in a way, you can't manage them anymore, because it feels like everything now is just like times 10. And a lot of us will refer to it as brain fog. That's the term, right? But for people with ADHD, it's been like that our entire life. And we've just tried to cover it up, or tried extra hard, or just created systems. But now that quote unquote brain fog is just like taken over our entire life, and we cannot function.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine as someone that doesn't have ADHD, it is hard navigating perimenopause for a non-ADHD brain.
Hmm.
Take away whatever safety net you have created as a woman with ADHD, maybe not even diagnosed, and you pull out some of the hormones. We know that as we're navigating perimenopause, at some point during perimenopause, 20 to 30% higher levels of estrogen. And then that starts to decline in the kind of latter stages prior to menopause.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine, depending on the individual, that they may find that they're having a harder time supporting a healthy mood. Like they may be
Right.
more distressed, there may be more depressive symptoms, more mood disorders. And this is just conjecture,
There
just
are.
based on what we're talking about, because that safety net that we've created for ourselves is suddenly pulled away. And I tell everyone that we don't appreciate the changes, the neurological changes as women are navigating perimenopause and menopause, until all of a sudden something just doesn't feel right. And it's not, oh, it's right before my cycle, it's a couple days each month, I have bad PMS, or, I just don't feel physically or emotionally great right before I get my menstrual cycle. Now all of a sudden it is weeks and months of
All the
feeling
time.
off. And so I think for a lot of women, it's both validating and also distressing to know this is oftentimes a crux of when many women are getting diagnosed. And actually, you refer to this as the lost generation.
Yeah.
This is when,
That's the term these days.
yeah, the lost generation, that there's a whole group of women who are feeling like they're kind of adrift at sea. Even if they get hormone replacement therapy or they've dialed in on lifestyle, they may still need more support to be able to navigate these significant changes in not just hormones, but also neurotransmitter production at this stage of life.
Hmm. So that's exactly why so many women are seeking a diagnosis, because it's like this is not. And also, we tend to have friends who are in a similar age range as us, and so you notice that there's that you're. It seems like you're kind of like, it's like perimenopause or menopause on steroids, quote unquote, right? Where it's just like, no, this is not what everyone else is experiencing. This is not typical brain fog. This is,
Absolutely.
and it turns out that this is ADHD. But I find it really interesting because I feel like every woman who's going through this phase of life benefits from tools that people who have ADHD need to function in their life, because we're all dealing with this, quote unquote, lower dopamine and, related to lower estrogen. But, it's like the same tools work, whether you have ADHD or whether you just, quote unquote, feel like you have ADHD. It's really just about managing your life. It's not, like what we do isn't about medication or hormone replacement. It's about tools and skills to go from point A to point B without losing your mind.
Yeah. And I think it was really helpful when you distinguished the gender differences. Like we think of ADHD in boys and young men is that it's much more physical, outward facing,
Hmm.
and ADHD in women tends to be much more inward facing, which to me really speaks to how women kind of suffer in silence. I mean, this is a generational issue. This is certainly, our generation is maybe finding their voices, but I think subsequent generations, people who maybe had experienced ADHD, they just never got diagnosed because this is something that, unless a woman is speaking about it, more often than not, she might look completely, I'm going to say air quotes, normal from the exterior. She may not have trouble focusing in on a conversation. She may not have trouble, like from an exterior perspective, being able to get tasks done, but is really suffering in silence.
Yeah. No, it's 100%. And that's why a lot of us get missed. And that's why it's it's honestly heartbreaking, and we're still in this right now. Like it's, in the year we're in, and the time of life that we're in, and with all of the, medical breakthroughs and understanding and destigmatization of mental health, we're still getting missed. And women are still being misdiagnosed and mismedicated, which is, it's heartbreaking because it just makes things a lot worse when you've been struggling your entire life and you're not feeling great about where your life is and how you're feeling and what you've been able or not able to accomplish, and you talk to your doctor about it. Practically practically all women are going to be misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety. And especially now, this year, they made the anxiety, self-assessments almost like mandatory just before your yearly checkup. And we're going to answer. I actually have the anxiety scales right here if you want to. I know it's mostly people are listening, but if you want to see all of the anxiety, the self-assessment, this is the GAD-7,
Okay.
and you've seen this, I'm sure, a
Yeah.
thousand times. Every single one of these 7 questions that they ask you on the self-assessment for anxiety would be answered as more than half the days or nearly every day for a woman who has ADHD, like trouble relaxing, being so restless that it's hard to sit still, feeling afraid as if something terrible might happen, like what I was saying before about catastrophizing, not being able to control worrying, feeling nervous. These are all female ADHD symptoms. Now, men have them as well, but there's no woman that's not going to respond to every single one of these on a high level. So they will be diagnosed with anxiety. And it's the same with depression, because the depression, the PHQ-9, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, is 9 questions. And 8 of the 9 questions would be answered more than half the days or nearly every day by a woman who has ADHD. Only the last one is 100% depression. Otherwise, feeling bad about yourself is one of these questions. Trouble concentrating on things. Tell me if there's a woman with ADHD that who doesn't do that. Trouble falling or staying asleep. This is any woman with ADHD would be one or the other. And it's just, you know, being so fidgety or restless that you seem to be like moving around, or, speaking, or you're just trying to like keep up with people. These are all 100%, except for the very last question, ADHD symptoms. So everyone, unless you specifically seek out an ADHD diagnosis, you will be misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety. And I want to, because now that I'm talking about this and I've written this book and everybody wants to talk about this now, it seems with me, it's wild because I'd say in the last 6 months when I've been very aware of this and speaking about it all the time, I have yet to meet a woman born in the 70s or 80s who has ADHD who was not initially misdiagnosed. We all have the same story, every single one of us. And
Yeah,
most of us were put on antidepressants.
really.
Yeah,
So,
we're not depressed.
well,
So
what I find interesting, so for listeners, you know, the GAD-7 and this other depression screening
PHQ-9.
tool. Yeah, so these screening tools, these are utilized by clinicians. Unless someone is actively looking for ADHD, I can appreciate why this gets missed. If someone's listening and they're like, I think I might have ADHD, how do women go about getting properly diagnosed?
This
What?
is the key question because even the ADHD self-assessment, the one that you'll tend to get at your physician's office, tends to be based on executive functioning.
Mhm.
Following through on things, like just like getting started on tasks and such. And it really, even the ADHD diagnosis misses a lot of the female symptoms and how we present. And so my advice to anyone who might suspect that they have ADHD is to seek out a diagnosis with a physician who is very familiar with women and our symptoms. Otherwise, you will once again likely be misdiagnosed with depression or anxiety. And for people who are listening that aren't, that are wondering, do I have ADHD or am I just anxious or maybe I do have depression? And by the way, a lot of us have both. So it's
Mhm.
like there's comorbid conditions, but the difference with women who have ADHD, and the one thing you can absolutely count on with 100% of women is that we live in perpetual overwhelm. And it's so overwhelming where you often feel like you're a deer caught in headlights. You just don't know what to do. You don't know how to start. You don't know what to do first. And that's your experience all the time. You
Yeah,
can't get
that
out of it. And so that perpetual overwhelm, if you connect to that, or if you're like, oh my gosh, that is totally me, and that's been me since I can remember, then I would say you might want to look into this.
well, and it's interesting because women are conditioned to believe that our brains are designed to multitask.
Right.
So imagine, and I'm the mother of all boys, and I'm the only female in my house. And with my kids, I could not give them five instructions. I can't even do that to my husband.
Right.
It's one or two
It's
things at a
one at a
time.
time.
Right. And then they could process and file through. But women are conditioned to believe that we should be able to multitask 24/7. And I would imagine if you have an ADHD brain physiology, that would be not only overwhelming, it would be terrifying to try to think that you are expected to get 15 different directions and be able to synthesize it all beautifully in your brain. I would imagine with the social conditioning that we're told, like, oh, you're brilliant at multitasking, you're a female.
Right. Here's the thing, because we need extra stimulus and we're constantly unconsciously seeking out dopamine,
Hmm.
we love the idea of multitasking because it's a game, and it's a game that our brain is playing. It's not necessarily a game that we're playing knowingly. And so if I have to get six things done, I'm going to go for it. And that's at least a little bit more interesting than just doing one thing at a time. The problem is that we're not going to be able to do it well, and it's not going to be done in the way that we would want it to be done, all of those six different things. But it's not something that we're necessarily afraid of because a lot of us love it, and we're constantly doing it. It's a habitual way of living where we're doing 6 to 10 things at the exact same time, and that's just who we are. And it's like nonstop, 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 and that is beautiful for a dopamine starved brain. think about it. Like that's exciting and fun and engaging, except then at the end of the day, that's what I say. It's like running around at 90 miles an hour, not getting what you want because you're not stopping and you're constantly doing, and your results are not what you want, even though it's interesting.
So I would imagine that at some point you were inspired to focus in on ADHD and to help coach other women. How long did it take you to get a diagnosis?
Uh, it took way too long. Like my life would have been completely different if I had been diagnosed as a child. And that's just how it is for our generation. Like I'm sure all of us feel the same way who have been finally diagnosed, but it took a devastating experience and uh, a life turned completely inside out to like the just in the worst way possible. Just it took like hitting rock bottom and then even deeper than that to be able to express how unbelievably horrible things were so that and it turned I was kind of lucky because when I was expressing things I was at a friend's house and his he was visiting his parents and his dad was a psychiatrist. Like what are the chances of that? So the dad was overhearing me talking to my friend and he was like, Shauna, have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD? And even then I was like, that's something that kids have. I can't believe you're asking me that. That makes things even worse, you know. But that sort of started the process. But it took like a big explosion in life to even think in that direction.
Well, I think there's probably listeners that are listening to our conversation that are saying, yes, that's exactly how mine got diagnosed, or a loved one, or a family friend.
Right.
And I think sometimes when our lives are the most challenging and we have to dig a bit deeper and be more self-reflective, sometimes that's when, when I use the term the magic happens. That's when we are able to view ourselves differently at that point in our lives, maybe than we ever have before.
I think it's absolutely amazing how many of us have hit the deepest depths of rock bottom and have it's like rising like a phoenix and have like our entire lives have been transformed from that experience. And I just think like it's beautiful and super bizarre how that tends to be, what happens. It's like, well, why does it have to be so bad? But I think it does. I think if it were just muted or if it was just like, a bad month or, not, I got let go from a job, like something like a typical terrible thing, um, then the transformation wouldn't happen because you would then again just be skirting around, skirting along life on the outside and just trying to get by. You have to hit certain levels in order to make very severe shifts because I mean, you probably know this and I'm sure you talk about this. Like pain is definitely a bigger motivator than pleasure. Even though that's unfortunate that it is, but it is. Like if you're in pain, you're going to do something about it much more quickly than if you just, decide that you want something.
Yeah. And it ties into one of my questions is how do feelings and emotions play into ADHD? Are they magnified? Are they intensified? How do feelings kind of work with ADHD symptoms in women?
So for women, this is our thing. It's emotions and mood. And the biggest, longest chapter in my book is mood management because I mean, if it could have been, I mean, honestly, every chapter in my book could have been a book, but mood management is everything. It's everything for women who have ADHD because we think about it like this. We have a brain and it's a beautiful brain and we're very smart, but our brain is unable to compartmentalize. Unable. Zero. So you've got a mood and you've got this emotion and you cannot compartmentalize it. So it
Mhm.
goes into everything. It spreads into every aspect of your being, of your soul, of your body. Like it's just, you become that mood. And that's great when it's a good mood because it's like, wow, everything is amazing and it's so awesome and I love life and wow, this is fantastic. And then if if it's a bad mood, it's like everything is disastrous and terrible and my life sucks and I'm never going to amount to anything ever. And so because we cannot compartmentalize, moods and emotions are everything. And managing your moods and emotions is everything because think about it. I mean, you can you might think, "Oh, I'm always late and I'm so disorganized and those are my biggest problems with my ADHD, those are my symptoms." But you can have the best time management and organization systems in the world. And these are like 100% of the time tried, tested, true, never fail. You will never be able to implement them if you don't feel like doing it. You just won't. You're going to have a whole bunch of systems and tools that are just brilliant and are going to completely change your life. But if you don't feel like implementing them and you don't want to, or you're having a bad day and you're just like, don't want to get out of bed, none of that matters because our moods take over everything. So, mood management is actually the number one thing, even though none of our clients come to us saying, I need to manage my mood. They all come to us like, I need to be on time for once. I need to remember my friends' birthdays. I need to like get organized because everything is such a mess. That's what people see, but that's not what they really need. Because I
Yeah,
think we
they
all have a lot of those tools already. We all know what we're supposed to do.
right. I mean, it's interesting. I had a wonderful roommate years ago who did have ADHD, was on medication, didn't love being on medication because she felt like it blunted her mood.
Sure.
She was a super happy, outgoing person, and she said, "I know when I have to take this medication because I have to be able to focus. I have exams or whatever it was with school." But she
Hmm.
would admit to me, and a lot of patients, she was not my patient, but a lot of patients would admit to me certain medications that I take to manage either mood disorders or ADHD. I know I need it, but I don't feel good when I'm on it.
Right.
So maybe we can touch on the medication piece. I know this is not your area of expertise,
Definitely.
but obviously, when we're talking about moods and motivation and structures and and systems, an ADHD brain, there are drugs that can force them to fit into that. We say jokingly in medicine, sometimes you have a patient that needs to fit into a round hole, but they're a square or vice versa. Like, it's like we're trying to force people into a system that their brains are not conditioned to be able to function within.
Correct. Correct. That's the whole thing. It's like you're the square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And so for those of us who didn't know that we had ADHD and you are in reality the square peg trying to fit into a round hole and that is your whole life, you feel like you just never being understood and you're just never going to belong and everything is different for you and you're on a different frequency as everyone around you and you don't know why.
Mhm.
Right. And so, then one day I hope somebody will tell you what's going on for you actually, and it's the right diagnosis and it is ADHD. You will likely be, um, you will likely at least be asked if you want to try medication. And for some people, they're not even asked, they're just told, here's your prescription, go fill it and call me and let's check in again in about 2 months. And that's just that's like a very small piece is medication. And also, there are so many different types of medication. And not only that, are there different types of medication? There's an entire spectrum of the dosage. How much are you supposed to take? So there's the typical dose, and that's what your doctor is going to prescribe for you, is the typical dose, but you're not typical.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people, in my experience, because I would say 70 to 80% of our clients do take medication. So they're in coaching and they take medication because obviously your medication does not come with like a book of skills and tools. And so, the medication, my saying, and a lot of, anybody who looks me up will see, like, I always say this, ADHD medication, it does help you focus. It does not help you focus on the right things. So, plenty of people who are taking an average dose of a typical ADHD med will be very, they'll say, like, I was able to focus on, organizing my kitchen cupboards for like 7 hours yesterday. Fantastic. But I didn't get anything done at work. Nothing. Nothing. But, or what's more, typical is like we say hyper focus on our social media feeds. Literally, you're like, you turn it on and you're not even looking up for another 3 hours. That's not effective. That's not good for your life. So how can you, number one, if you're prescribed a medication, you really have to question the dosage. And if it's making you feel like your mood is blunted, you will want to question the actual medication that you've been prescribed, because it shouldn't feel like that. It should just feel like just enough to keep you focused on what you want to be focused on.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I think
yeah.
the bioindividuality is certainly a role. Shared decision making with your provider is clearly important. To your point, a lot of these drugs are stimulants and they are not selective, meaning you can organize your kitchen, but then you didn't work, or
Yeah.
you start scrolling on TikTok, but then you forget you burned the kitchen dinner
Yeah, or
and forgot to pick
you
up
didn't pick up your kid.
but I say forgot to pick up your child. And so those are definitely real concerns and issues. And the sad thing is, like, I'll be totally transparent. I do not have ADHD, but I can tell you, like, of all the social media platforms, the most, and I don't want to use the term addictive, the particular platform that is the easiest to get sucked into is TikTok.
Oh, for
And
sure.
even my
They call
kids
it
will talk.
ADHD talk.
Right. So to the point that, like, even someone who doesn't have a brain that's conditioned to be that way, these platforms are designed to keep you on
Yes.
them as long as possible, as long as possible, and kind of distract yourself from the rest of your existence. So
Yep.
we talk a little bit about treatments, and you say pills don't treat skills.
Pills
That's
don't
number
teach
one.
skills.
Yeah, don't teach skills. Let's talk a little bit about a lot of what you spend time discussing in the book is how to address ADHD proactively. Like, what are the things that we can do in our personal lives? And for some of this, it can be a bit of strategy. And one thing that really stood out to me was shrinking your to-do list. Like, what are we really
Oh,
good at
yeah.
as women? And there was a book that came out, gosh, like 10 years ago. It's called Eat the Frog. And
Oh,
this
Brian
book,
Tracy.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
this book is like stupid, simple, short, but it is something that I remind myself every day. Like, don't put 20 things on your to-do list. Give yourself like the two things you want to do least and get them done first thing in the morning. That is eating the frog. But it
There you
goes
go.
along with your kind of shrinking your to-do list in terms of prioritization because it is so easy to get lost in the overwhelm.
Oh my gosh, all of us do. All of us do, no matter who you are, especially if you're a woman in perimenopause or menopause, right? You will get lost inside of the overwhelm. And so I think it's so helpful. And I do this before even teaching people how to prioritize, because you need to prioritize, but
Yeah.
first you have to get in the habit of doing less at a time.
Mhm.
And that really is a habit that cannot be overstated, because we tend to always want to do more and more and more and more, and there's like this never ending list. So I would say the typical client that comes to us has a to-do list that's minimum 30 items long. And remember, we have a brain that can't compartmentalize. So you got this to-do list, and it's like this never-ending list, and you can't compartmentalize. You're gonna look at that list, your eyes are going to visually see it. What's your brain gonna do? It's just like, And so it's just like this explosion of, oh my gosh, what do I do first? I'm just gonna go turn on the TV. Forget it. And
You're looking for a distraction.
I can't do any of this. I'm not doing this. I'm going for a walk. I'm gonna text my friend. So you have to get into a completely different habit, which at the beginning, before you start prioritizing, is just pick two. I mean, we say keep it to three and you're free, but three is the maximum, the very, very maximum. Just pick two. Just go, like, close your eyes and point to one and start putting those two things on a piece of paper, not on your computer, not on your calendar, because there's going to be thousands of other things there. Just write it down, just those two things. And that's all you're going to focus on right now. And that is a new way of dealing. And that is a new way of managing. And then, once we can get into that habit, we can then start to prioritize, obviously, what two things you want to do now and what two things need to get done first. And then you need to really separate them. I have it like my to-do list. I talk about a parking lot in my book, which I will I am such a believer in this. So that because if we have thoughts in our brain and we don't know what to do with them, we're going to start to take action on them right away. But if you have a parking lot and you just write down those thoughts, now they have a place and you can kind of relax and not worry that you're going to lose the thought, and you can keep doing whatever it was that you were doing initially. But if you have, here's my two tasks. I'm showing you a part, like a notebook. It has task 1 with a very thick box around it, task 2 with a very thick box around it, and you have to put the box around it because these have to be contained. They can't they can't go out, and you can't get anything else to go in. So you focus on task 1 and then you focus on task 2, and that's it. And this is not overwhelming, especially when you break down your tasks into tiny little steps, and then those become tasks in and of themselves. So task 1 now has 2 mini tasks inside of it, and you just focus on one of those at a time. That's how people with ADHD, and that's how, even a woman in perimenopause or menopause, that's how you're going to be able to get things done, is by training. It's like a retraining just to focus on one thing at a time.
I would actually argue that any woman in middle age needs that reminder. And I say this lovingly because my kids know, like, I have sticky notes kind of everywhere. And so like if I'm recording a podcast and I'm like, oh, I forgot to buy a birthday. I mean, I can write it down as
Yes.
I'm just I'm like, and then the thoughts out of my head.
Good.
How many of us have these massive to-do lists? You are never going to get all those things done. So what I do every day is it's the eat the frog, but to your point,
Yeah.
max 3 things. These are three
Good.
things I have to get done. And then I have another list that like I will pull things off of every day, like what on this list needs to be prioritized, if anything.
If
But
anything.
if I think for so many women, those long to-do lists are overwhelming.
Hmm.
They are not productive. I would actually argue they probably make you feel bad because you're like, what I didn't get accomplished today. I had a patient tell
Right.
me that a couple weeks ago. Look at all the things I didn't accomplish. And I was like, no, let's find a reframe.
Hmm.
Because even if you
Good.
just got one thing done,
Right.
one thing less on your list,
Yep.
one
And you
thing
got it
one
done,
less.
and you actually did it rather than
Exactly.
nothing. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, 100%.
Talk about lifestyle measures. Like on the podcast, we
Oh,
talk a lot about sleep and stress management and nutrition and exercise. These are all foundational to our lives, probably even more so as we are in this middle age transition. Let's talk about these because it just reaffirms why our lifestyle choices can either enhance or exacerbate how we perceive ourselves and the world.
right. You deal with people every single day. So think about a neurotypical patient who has not gotten enough sleep for the last, let's say, week, just 1 week. They haven't gotten enough sleep. Besides feeling tired, what are their symptoms going to be?
Oh, they're going to crave crappy food. They're not going to feel like exercising. They're probably not going to interact in a positive manner with their loved ones because they're short tempered and they're cranky. Oh,
Yep.
I mean, it
Are
just
they
has
going
a
to be
trickle
are they going to
effect.
be more patient or less patient than usual?
Much less,
Much less patient. Are they going to be more impulsive or less impulsive than usual?
more impulsive,
Much more impulsive. Are they going to be more overwhelmed or less overwhelmed than usual?
more overwhelmed.
For sure. Everything, every single symptom of sleep deprivation is an ADHD symptom. All
Isn't
of
that
it.
insightful? I mean,
It's
for anyone who's
it's
listening,
unbelievable. So if you have ADHD and you are not getting enough sleep, forget about it. It's the number one thing that you need to be focusing on, because anyone who doesn't have enough sleep has all of the same symptoms you have. And now you, who were born like this, now your symptoms have just multiplied by 100. 100. So again, that's like, I would say that's so foundational. And yet, because the typical ADHD medications tend to be stimulants, so now we're giving a person a beautiful, brilliant, all of the possibilities available to them in the world, right? A, a stimulant medication. and telling them that they need to get more sleep. So it's very difficult if you're taking stimulants, which means, but it is doable. And the only way to do it properly to make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep is to take your medication the second you wake up. Like keep it next to your bedside table so that you take it as early as possible so that it wears off when you need to go back to sleep. If you don't
That's
take it till later, if you're somebody who takes your ADHD medication at 11 a.m. or noon, you're not going back to sleep until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And it's just a cycle. Like you cannot break free from that cycle because you're taking these medications.
well, and it also, I would imagine, disrupts your circadian biology. So it's going
Everything.
to impact when you fall asleep, when you get hungry, when you feel like you have a libido, if at all. It probably
Yeah.
impacts,
Yeah, it does.
everything. And
Yeah.
sleep is so foundational to our health, and we talk about that a lot here. When you said, imagine how you feel when you're sleep deprived, that is an ADHD brain. And I think about key times in my adult life, like when I had newborns
Mm-hmm.
or sick kids, or my husband wasn't home, and how I felt like I could barely tie my shoes and put one foot in front of the other. It is incredibly humbling. And so I want listeners to
Yeah.
really get a sense for what that distraction or that distracted brain really feels like.
That's a perfect example that you just shared. And that really is it's that seems to be our existence. If we don't know how to manage it and we're just kind of going with the flow, and just trying to get by and we don't know what to do, that's how it feels. It's just one foot in front of the other and it's so difficult. It's so difficult because everyone around you seems to be doing everything with no problem whatsoever,
Yeah.
which makes it even feel worse.
Oh, of course, it starts that whole shame, blame,
Mhm.
that whole women do such a fantastic job with
Oh,
shaming,
yeah.
shame ourselves backwards and forwards. Let's talk about some
Yeah.
of the other strategies because this is what I think, for me as a clinician, really is what you do a really profoundly amazing job with is really helping people think about like the importance of having a system, creating goals, the value of delayed gratification in a society where, our kids are growing up in a non-delayed gratification environment.
Isn't it? It's
I
it's
was
kind of unbelievable when we watch our kids.
Well, I will give you this example because anyone from our generation will appreciate this. I was saying to my kids, unlike having a streaming service, when your dad and I were first married, we were subscribed to Netflix and we would get DVDs in the mail. So that's number one. They were like, "What?"
Red
And I said,
box DVDs.
imagine when I was growing up in the 80s, you would have a VHS store and you would sign up for like the most popular movies. And when you got called, you could go and pick up the one copy they had of like Breakfast Club or whatever we were
Yeah.
wanting to watch, scary
Yep.
movie. My kids were so stunned. And I said, my generation knows what it's like for delayed gratification. I said, your generation will never fully understand because whether it is you didn't have to go to the card catalog to find out where the book was in the library. My kids were astonished. What do you
Yeah.
mean? You had to go to the card catalog to figure out where the book was, and you had to go to the stacks to find the book and pull it out yourself. There was no, you instantly can download a PDF. There was none of that.
No,
This generation, I'm curious
how it's going to turn
how the
out.
lack of delayed gratification is going to play out for them and their brain physiology, and whether or not we're going to see more people that are diagnosed with dopamine issues, brain dopamine issues. I would imagine we're going to see escalating rates
Oh
of
yeah, there's no
these
question.
issues. Yeah.
There's no question. I have a son who's 13 and he obviously likes to play video games. And so
Mhm.
do his friends. He likes to do a million things, including, music and sports and all of that. But I remember um, hearing his friends at our house, like just talking about how they can't it's like it's impossible to wait for anything. So
Yep.
like they were having a hard time with one of the games and like trying to get I don't know what was going on, but it literally was less than 2 minutes and everyone was freaking out.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's see if we can go through this step by step, like turn this off, turn that on, whatever. But it was such a frustrating experience. And there's no question that this whole instant gratification, at a moment, like what you were talking about with the, just click on your converter and you can have any movie you want, anything at snap of the fingers. This is I it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but there's no question that we're making sure that everyone's brains are wired to just be like like right now, right now, right now, right now. That's exactly how these kids are growing up.
Mhm.
And there's nothing, unless you're going to a school that has no technology, where everything is outdoors and your classroom is in a tree house. I don't know how we're gonna be able to fix that part of what our kids are experiencing right now. I just don't, because like fourth graders are going to school with a laptop,
Yeah.
with
Well, that
which,
was
in my mind, that's going to school with a TV in your backpack, because you can, unless you turn off all of the internet, you can have anything you want on that laptop.
Well, it's interesting. Most of the schools that my boys, because I now have a high school senior and a college sophomore, when they were in middle and high school, they had Chromebooks,
Right.
and the school system controlled the Chromebook. So
Yes.
there was no internet surfing from school. So they had some control. But I agree with you that whether it's the power of an iPhone in a pocket, whether it's the accessibility. I was watching a show yesterday, and this 23-year-old said, if you can't get to the point, she was saying to her sister who was trying to market something, if you can't get to the point in 10 seconds, my generation will tune you out.
Yeah,
And I thought,
you're done.
wow. I mean, that was so that kind of typifies this. We have a generation of kids that have a really short attention span. And then you
Yep.
magnify, like if someone has the physiology of ADHD on top of that, I would think it would just magnify all of that.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And it's distressing, because, everyone, in addition to the fact that they need everything instantly yesterday, they still have to sit in a classroom for our local high school. The classes are 90 minutes long.
That's long.
How is that allowed? Like, we're not, and that is just how it is. And so all of these kids are, and of course they divide up the class with, where you have to listen to the teacher and now you have to do your work and now we're going to talk about it. But still, this is 90 minutes on the same topic.
Yeah. Well, I
And so
mean,
a lot of kids are feeling much more frustrated with that than they would have when I was in high school. Our classes back in the day were 75 minutes, which
mhm.
honestly seems like a long time right now, but we were able to, it was possible. Right now, I don't know how these kids are doing it, and I don't think they're having an easy time with it.
No, I would imagine. I mean, I'm in the middle of a program that I'll be finished with it. Then not thankfully, I'm grateful that I'm in a program. But I remember we were doing an in-person cohort, and they expected grown adults to sit all day long and passively, like we were getting lectures and we had our laptops open, so we're going through slides. And I turned to the person next to me and I said,
Wow.
I don't think I've had to sit still this long and concentrate in so many years. And I said, I have forgotten how challenging it is to do that, even with a brain that can focus. I mean, I can do that, but it
You're
just
not
gives
used
you a
to it.
no, but I said it gives you a profound appreciation for what we're expecting young
Of our
people to be
kids.
doing.
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
100%.
If we were to
No.
think of three strategies that are in the book that you think are the most important, I mean, they're probably all important, but for
They're all
listeners,
important or
they're
they
all
wouldn't be in the
important.
book.
But maybe like your favorite three that we can share with listeners. Obviously, if
Hmm.
you think you have ADHD or you have a loved one, this would be an excellent resource. But let's focus the rest of our time just talking about three of your favorite strategies for women in middle age that are struggling with their symptoms.
I feel like one of the strategies that's like 100% success rate, where
Love
everybody
it.
loves this, everybody wants to do it, and everyone does do it, and it works out brilliantly, is mood scheduling, because we really aren't all morning people. And some of us, great. Well,
Surprise.
a lot of us are, but a lot of us are not. And we all have a unique circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
And it turns out, like, even let's just say, 80% of us are morning people, or 70% of us, we tend to do the most menial tasks at the time of day when we're the most awake and wanting, like wanting to be fed with information. And so I think like mood scheduling is very simple. Figure out the times of day that you have the most energy. Like really figure this out. It might be like an hour between, 9 and 10, or it actually could be between 8 and 9 p.m., which shockingly is a time that a lot of our clients tend to be like their most like it's like their calmest, most productive hour of the day. But, for a lot of people, it's early morning. It could be in the afternoon. Some people that are completely out of energy in the afternoon, zero. So figure out the hours, the blocks that are your most productive times. And you're going to have more than one, hopefully, this time and that time. And also figure out the times of day that you have the least amount of energy, because it's going to be similar, every day. You're going to notice that you start, like people talk about that 3 o'clock, whatever, the slowdown, or they need a coffee. But for a lot of us, that's a great time of day. So just figure out what yours is. And when you have your high energy times of day, that's when you schedule your most difficult tasks, the difficult ones, because your brain needs to be completely turned on. And so use your natural circadian rhythm to help you. The times of day that you have the least amount of energy, that's when you schedule your easiest tasks. So you have to be very, you really have to be very intentional. Okay? Don't just like do things according to what you think you should be doing or what everyone else is doing. Easiest tasks at your lowest energy times, hardest tasks at your highest energy times. That will be a game changer for you. And so and I promise that's one thing that I would recommend everybody start doing immediately, is just like mood scheduling. We already talked about keep it to 3 and you're free. That is something where I think anyone listening or watching, it's so much easier said than done. So you're going to hear it. You're going to be like, oh yeah, okay, keep it to 3 and you're free. Great, I'll do that. But then you won't. So I think
It's
I
human
say
nature, right? Like we're
it
like,
just,
yes, I'll do that. And then we
yeah,
don't
I'll
do
do
it.
that. Oh, I know about that. I've heard that before. I don't know if you noticed, but in my book, I cannot tell you how many times I tell people, hearing about something does not mean you know it.
Yes.
It doesn't. I'm sorry. The only way you know something is by doing it. You doing it in your life. Period. End of story. Otherwise, you just know about something. So you have to do these things. That's like the crux of our entire coaching program, is not telling people what to do and hoping that they do it. It's making sure people do it by doing it with them and we are doing it together, and I'm literally holding your hand but not physically, because usually it's over Zoom. And it's like muscle memory. Now you're doing it. Like if I had, Cynthia, let's figure out what are your highest energy times of day and write them down and actually put it in your calendar what your most difficult tasks are. We're going to do that together. And then at the end of this podcast, you're going to actually have a different schedule, where you're doing like things at a different time of day. So don't just hear about these things. Do it. Do the mood scheduling, do the keep it to 3 and you're free. Actually shrink your to-do list. That is like key for any woman who is overwhelmed, which I think is all of us. And there's so many
No,
for
there are. I made a list of like everything in the book, and I was like, but this is why I wanted to ask you like three of your favorites, ones that
So
you
my
find are,
personal, like this is something that I started doing completely unknowingly, not knowing anything about my brain, when I was much younger, like in elementary school, younger. But when I write things out with my non-dominant hand, so that's my left hand, it is instantly slows me down and slows down my thinking process, because now instead of thinking about the 50 billion things that I was thinking about, just before, now I'm only thinking about drawing the letter A. And like, how do I make an A and where do I put that little line across? And oh my God, it's like not at the right place. And, if I am upset, this is something that's really key for mood management. Anything that's upsetting, I try my very hardest to come up with a solution or an understanding of whatever it was that upset me. So things that upset me personally would be, honestly, this sounds so silly because it's something that every parent has to deal with. But when my kids talk back to me, I take it personally. And it's like the dumbest thing ever. And I completely know that. But I do. I take it personally. And it really bothers me when they talk back to me. It upsets me. So I know, like, logically, this is what kids do. And I try to come up with, like, why did they do that? What, were they feeling disrespected? Were they, just wanting something so badly that they couldn't see another angle around it? So I think about any kind of solution or understanding, and I try to simplify it into one sentence. And then I'll write down that one sentence with my non-dominant hand. So now I am completely focused. Instead of being hurt and upset and angry at my kids, I'm like totally focused on every letter regarding the solution or the understanding I was trying to come to about why they talked back to me. And when I'm focusing on writing that out, I instantly go from a level 10 of upset to like a level 1. Like it's like an instant, it's like a switch. And that is one of my personal go-tos is writing things out, solutions with my non-dominant hand, because my brain is way too fast and I can absolutely go into spins, just like a lot of us. And so I stop that by doing the non-dominant handwriting.
I love that. I mean, I
Mm.
think a lot of the strategies in the book are even things that people that do not have ADHD that would benefit from. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like
100%.
it's practical, it's insightful, the eat the frog or keep it to three. Like that has been a life-changing thing for me as an entrepreneur, like
Hmm.
life-changing. I
Good.
so have enjoyed this conversation. I think this is
Mhm.
really going to resonate with listeners, many of whom probably suspect they may have some degree of ADHD. Maybe they haven't been formally diagnosed. They could use
Mm.
the book as a great resource. Thank you
This
so
book is going to
much.
help everyone. I like
Yeah,
I already know that because so many people who have been reading advanced copies have been like sharing it with friends and partners that do not have ADHD. And apparently there's, this book will help everyone who has any amount of overwhelm stopping them in their life. And so
that's
if
everyone.
you want, yeah, Invisible ADHD, you can, go to invisibleadhd.com or just get it on Amazon. And if anybody does have ADHD and they want help going from point A to point B and they need extra support, we can be found at adhdcoaching.com. And we also offer a free introductory session just to see if this is a good fit for you. So there's no strings whatsoever. You can just check it out if you want some help and support.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And as I mentioned and will mention in the intro, you've helped hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds of thousands of women be able to take back their lives and help build strategies that are sustainable in addressing ADHD. And the other crux of that is if you're dealing with overwhelm, this book is going to be very helpful. And I
Oh, yeah.
cannot think of any woman out there that at some capacity or another has had times in their lives where they have certainly felt that way. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you, Cynthia. It was so great.
Hey, if you like this video, you guys are going to love this video, and I'll see you there.
We make almost all of our fat cells during childhood and puberty. And then once we finish puberty, we're done. That number of fat cells, in most people, there are some people who are an exception to this, and that's about 15% of people who are in the obese category. But most people reach a limit, and that's their fat cell number essentially for adulthood.